I just make it clear now here. I'm in an art and aesthetics session. I'm not an aesthetic person from humanities. I'm an artist, so I'm a maker. So just to clarify, and weird enough, this might be a little bit art historical, this talk. Maybe it comes clear why I sort of, in my research, need to look at things like that. So what I'm talking today is art that deals with environment and art that deals with the biological and living matter, and looking a little bit into the history. And here's probably a known figure for at least some of you, Jack Burnham, and who was writing a lot in 1960s and 1970s, and, for example, articulating out the real-time systems. And these real-time systems were art which is linked to the environment. Could not only natural, could also be other. But one of his, of course, examples was, like you can see in his book, Great Western Saltworks, is the Spiral Jetty, which was also, I think, this morning in the Antti's slides on that. So Burnham was writing. So what he was actually observing is a shift in the art world. So the prominent art world at the time was the world where the art was objects, paintings, sculptures, and so on. And he started looking at the shift and realized that art is a system, and that's an interesting thing. And so he also, so he was, hold on, I have to read a little bit. So Burnham saw a change in art from fixed art object to dynamic system. In this viewpoint, a strong emphasis was given to an environment and a communication between the system and environment. And he also pointed out many aspects that are actually more prominent maybe today in the artworks, such as maintaining the biological livability of the earth, producing more accurate models of social interaction, understanding the growing symbiosis in man-machine relationships, and establishing priorities for usage and conservation of natural resources. I took here one of my favorite land art works have always been this Michael Heitzer's double negative, actually built in the same year than Spiral Jetty, or started already in earlier. And I used to know it from this kind of a historical image, like in the lower, where it's this kind of cut in the Nevada desert. This is still existing, and it's, I think, under the LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum, I think. And it's said by the artist that one cannot maintain it. And this is a recent photo from a satellite. Here's now, okay, this comes first. Yeah, so I'm looking a little bit into the terminology, and that's really kind of academic, and not really, but sometimes you need to look. So there's so many of these terms. I think someone else was already mentioning them, that it's a kind of unclear. So I have looked in. So environmental art, that's the widest category. That usually is defined just using natural materials, which are often found on site. And there's Andy Goldsworthy is a typical example, although he's environmentalist and photographer, so his works often come out as photographs. But he uses the stuff what's on the ground. Then is land art, or sometimes called earthworks, and these are often this kind of monumental works like Michael Heitzer's in their scale and how they're placed. And this actually art was born as a rejection towards this object art. So it was that artists actually were radically going to places where you cannot make an object. However, I think someone said also, yeah, but they're quite traditional and sort of aesthetic gestures. So I also see them today, when you look at them, they're like sculptures on the landscape. However, it was a radical intervention towards or against the art scene at the time. And I put it here, the one example, Walter de Maria, the New York Earth Room, which is actually a little bit different. That's why I just put it here, which is this, since 1980, it's been shown in New York, and you can go and look at it. It's a room filled with the earth. But that's also kind of included in these works. However, it's different. Then the last category is the eco art, ecological art. And that is typically said to be that it's ecologically friendly and benefiting the earth, and I would add to that also often benefiting the humanity specifically. So the works, they deal with everyday problems such as erosion, loss of biodiversity, stormwater management, or invasive species. So in a general, one could say that eco art aims at repairing and preserving environmental damage. Here's just an example, Helen and Newton Harrison studio work, Peninsula Europe tree about the reforestation of the highlands in Europe, which deals with the water management. Okay, here's the same image then I think Eric had in the slide, which is the Finnish-based American artist Agnes Denes's Tree Mountain. And okay, here's her plan in the middle. The top, I think, is quite soon after it was planted. In 2013, it looks like this. So it's interesting when one visits the place, it starts blending into the environment. Or so I thought, until I saw this. And that is actually, I think, the most of the land artists at the time never thought about that actually in the future their works will be viewed very differently through the technologies. And that's also the Michael Heitzer's, the other work was a satellite image from Google Earth, where you could actually get a scale out of his work. And here's the same. So I think this is, one could ask, okay, what kind of works come now with these which are impacted of this? What was fascinating is that actually you still see the structure from the drone footage. Thanks for this Estonian guy who was there. And I checked out most of the major land art works you can find drone footage online of them. Okay, so here's an example of then something ecological art, and this is a Halikonlahti Magic of Water 2007, also American artist 2007, did these 3 islands to regenerate the area, so they are bird nesting, but also they clean the water. However, I had to put the construction images there, which I find quite interesting. It's ecological, but it's not necessarily ecological materials. So you see there's plastics, and then they made fake stones out of polyurethane and so on. So I think that's an interesting notion which I think easily is left unnoticed. Apparently it works quite well. Here's another one. This is a recent one. So this summer there is a project in Malmö called Agricultura, and this is a Finland-based. I don't know if I should say Egle Finnish or Finland-based, so I say Finland-based artist who did the Ark of Seeds, and she has a long-term land restoration initiatives which include research and experimentation with plants and their growth. Often they also might include some sculptural object or some performative actions. And this Ark of Seeds is a mix of traditional cultivators and wild plants, and a large part of them were edible. And the artist has a wish that the municipality would let the plot exist at least 5 years to be able to observe how these plants migrate from one place to another as they mixed. So it's a kind of testing out this maybe traditional ecologies instead of kind of monocultural thinking or this organized. I'm skipping quickly a few more terms which are more recent. We all have heard these today: art science, biotech art, and bioart. And this is, of course, bioart has been defined as an art practice where humans work with live tissues, bacteria, living organisms, life processes, and uses usually scientific processes. They are produced in laboratories, galleries, or studios. However, I think this definition has been already widened up with the various experiments, and it's not anymore so strict as it was maybe earlier. Biotech art is a very recently emerged term which you hear now, and that kind of references methods from biotechnology to art production. And the art and science is the widest category. that addresses and use development in science and technology within art. So how art sort of addresses science and technology or uses its methods or its discoveries. Some more works from Malmö linking to that. And here I would like to point that there are recent projects which do not necessarily aim at improving the ecology, but they speculate on it, and they address both science and technology development. So this is a transplant in Malmö, and it was 3 this kind of spheres, and these spheres were each maintained as a microclimate. And they had native Swedish plants inside these spheres. And the one was sort of simulating the 2056 in Malmö when the temperature has warmed 2.5 degrees. Then next one 2110 and with the 5.8 degrees of Celsius, and the last one is 10.2 degrees Celsius, and that matches the temperature of Namibia. So, yeah, okay. So now I'm running. So this is one. Here's another similar idea. Oliver Kellhammer looking at the past and looking 55 million years ago, there was a 5-degree heating. One of the trees is Ginkgo biloba, which was then living based on fossils, and so he planted them. This is very different. Swedish artist looked at dandelions, and there he mapped out the dandelions and actually translocated them in the same spot. So he numbered them and brought them into this site in Malmö, in Hyllie. So that not yet. So my question here is that what kind of category would these works belong to? And even more importantly, what kind of image of the world and relation to our natural environment we depict with these kinds of works and practices? And here I think it's interesting to point out that if you think of the ideology which was driving the land art, the historical, that was against the art scene at the time. So where are we here? I don't have an answer. It's a question to you. To complicate more the systems, there's of course Brandon Ballinger, environmentalist, researching these deformities in amphibian population and collecting them with many legs and photographing them. He did a work also with the roboticist Louis-Philippe Demeur, where they built one of them and looked at the movements, how can it move with the 6 back legs. And this is probably some of you know, German lady, 20 years of science illustration type of drawings on insects, and she finally published the science paper on that. So it's in the where the Chernobyl blew up and where they landed the pollution or the nuclear plants around them. She goes and collects the bugs, and she has been able to actually prove now with the science paper that the low-level radiation causes huge damages or distortion. So on those sites, compared to the comparison site, the difference is from 20 to 30% to 1 to 2% of deformities. Recent book from last year from her, which is called The Power of Weak Radiation, What the Nuclear Industry Does Not Tell Us. My works I will skip. Some of my environmental works, reversing device for new nature, microbial fuel cell, work with the cloned Christmas trees, and then some more laboratory works, and especially I wanted to point to Nicole Clouston's work, which is just mud, but very scientifically placed in a plexiglass. So it's a mud, and then it gets some nutrition, and the microbes start thriving. And my last 2 slides, this is more important, so that's why I'm just skipping there. So I think also questions can be these robots and other technologies in combination with natural environment is another interesting aspect. So my claim with this talk is that our perception of nature, environment and ecology has changed. Not only that human manipulation has increased and been accepted, but that today's artistic practices that are comparable to historical categories of land art, eco art and environmental art are infused with technology and made with technological mindset. And I think this is the interesting key here. And a lot of them are more critical compared to the old and speculative and point towards the future. And here one should also remember that biotechnology is actually an engineering discipline. This is a last note, and this is the reason I had to do this talk, is that I have recently proposed an emergence of what I call uncanny nature. That is a nature that is visible in artistic works, but which no longer simulates or creates representations of the world, but uses living organisms, technology, earthly conditions, and so on. So this kind of art both observes and explores the possibilities of the uncanny nature, a nature or reality that used to be familiar, but which has been modified in a laboratory, extended with the newly designed features, all located in a new context with various agencies and components. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Laura.